Welcome back to another episode of the Meet McKay Show. Today, we talk with a founder, a CEO, and entrepreneur of a publicly traded company. And I was very curious to see what it was like being the CEO of a publicly traded company, how to deal with investors, and his journey to becoming that founder and CEO. So if you guys get any sort of value from this podcast, consider subscribing or sharing it on Twitter. It would mean a whole lot to me. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. And without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back to the Meet McKay Show. Today, we are honored to have Steve Reinharz with us today. He is the CEO of AITX, a revolutionary security company. Today, we're going to talk to Steve Reinharz about exactly what has led him to become the CEO of AITX's entrepreneurial journey, as well as discussing his company, some of the successes he has, some of the things that he's learned along the way, and everything in between. So, Steve, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about it and love the podcast. So happy to
Awesome.
help.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Awesome. So let's just dive right into it. What was your first taste of entrepreneurship like, and at what age did you start?
I started young, right? And I like to tell people that if they haven't been in a leadership position or felt the need to be in a leadership position by about their mid-20s, that they're probably not going to be. I've really found that a lot of this is inside one. And I found that, being honest to who you are sets you up for this path to happiness, as I call it. So for me, entrepreneurism or serial entrepreneurism for me is, a compulsion and a affliction. People might look at you and say, oh, they're so successful, blah, 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 blah. But the reality of it is, sometimes I look over the fence at other folks that, are punching the clock on a 9-to-5 or a corporate job or this or that. And I'm like, man, that's got to be pretty fun to go and just do what you're told all day and come back home at night and pay your bills. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the moment, I'm not built that way. I just need to be out there. I need to max every moment. So through high school, I was doing some little entrepreneurial ventures, in high school, kind of learning some leadership, just doing different things. And then when I was in college, I wrote a book. I wrote a book on artificial intelligence. And that was my first real entrepreneurial adventure. I had to raise money, right, which is a key element that defines an entrepreneur. Absolutely. Had to create the content, had to, get it printed, then had to sell it. So it was a real business, and made a ton of mistakes along the way. That was my first real business. I was 19.
Very cool. And what made you want to make a book on artificial intelligence?
I had a great teacher at a high school, computer sciences teacher, who was just really, really impactful on me, really encouraged me to kind of just, again, follow these paths, these instincts and feelings that I had. And so my grade 13 in Ontario, Canada at the time, we had 13 grades for high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote, that was my thesis project. And I turned it into a 64-page book between first and second year college, because I'd been doing landscaping for 4 summers, like throughout high school and the first year of college. And I was like, okay, maybe it's time for change. I don't know. I mean, it was great. I had a good run, but everything needs to come to an end. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna give this a go. And I did. And it was crazy.
Very cool. So you wrote that book in college, and it sounds like you were studying computer science. Take me from that journey. What's led you kind of to be where you're at today?
I wasn't studying computer science.
Oh, okay.
I was doing political science and administrative and commercial studies, kind of like a junior business degree. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to get into Canada's foremost business school, the Richard Ivey School of Business. So, I did all these things, right? Like, I joined a varsity sports team and I became a leader in my fraternity, and I did this entrepreneurial venture, and I became, vice president of membership for an international entrepreneurial association that Michael Dell was a big part of back in this. I did all these things, all these resume stacking things, these real things that built my skills. And I said, hey, I'm going to be able to get into this school, because if you got into that school, your future was really, really well assured. One of my roommates did get in and eventually ran Google Canada for a number of years, and,
very cool.
has created quite a distinguished resume for himself. That's the kind of school, it's kind of like a Harvard of Canada type thing. And so I'm working at it, but my grades aren't good. I'm just not the academic type. I just don't care. I'm just not. I'd always finish in top 25 percentile, which is really all I wanted to do for myself. But I didn't really care. I was dumb. I still think a lot of academics are overwrought, dumb, ancient. So it's an institution that needs to change. So I didn't have the grades. Long story short, I didn't get in, and I'm like, God damn it. What's my plan B? Well, I didn't have a plan B. So that summer, I managed to. This was early '90s in Canada, bad recession, really, really bad time, and through a buddy of mine, his sister worked at AT&T Canada. I managed to get an internship in marketing department. And this was between second and third year college. And it was amazing. I was working 100 hours a week. I was making money. It was learning. It was amazing. And at the end of the term, they said, hey, do you want to bail on school and just come full time? And I was so torn because the economy was so bad. And it's not like I come from a privileged background. So I was like, I got to finish this degree. What do you think, 2 years, you think you'd be ready for me still? And they're like, they can't make any guarantees. I said, okay. So I finished my last 2 years of college in 1 year.
Wow.
In the hopes, with no guarantee, that I would be able to go back to AT&T. Again, recession still raging. 1/3 of college graduates getting jobs in their chosen fields. Bad, really bad. And so I accelerated my last 2 years into one, went back to AT&T and got to work. And that's really when I started learning how to work. My manager was an MBA graduate from the school I didn't get into. And
Dang.
she was an undergraduate degree from Oxford with a Rhodes Scholarship degree. And she has also created quite a profile for herself. And she's really the one who I credit for training me to work and think, and I practice a lot of those skills that she beat into me today.
Very cool. Why did you go back to school? What was that driving factor that, like, you had a job in hand, and like you said, during a recession, I feel like you could almost guarantee a great job that you loved, to almost risk it to go back to school. What was the driving force that made you go back?
Great question. That's a huge question. The answer is programming. We're programmed to finish our degrees. We've got pressure from society, from parents, from friends, from peers, all these areas. And unfortunately, that's the truth. And recognizing the pressures that you have on you and what it's causing you to do and forcing you to do and forcing you to feel is one of the steps you have to take in order to find your path to happiness. And I didn't have it at that time. It took me many years to figure it out.
Gotcha. So a little bit of a hot take. What's your take on entrepreneurs or people that are wanting to just dive right into the business field, saying, I need to go to school first, and delaying that work experience?
You just nailed it. You nailed it. You're delaying it. Tell me something. Do you think an education system created 150 years ago is really going to help you? Are you really the score that you got on a test, a bunch of questions that may or may not be relevant to anything you care about? And listen, I've got 4 kids. One of them has a 4-year degree from Loyola Marymount. Another one is finishing second year at Boston University. A third one did like 3 months at college, and is kind of a bit following a pathway to some extent that you and some of your peers are, in terms of e-com, TikTok, finding ways to make money, following their path. And I support them 100%. And what's interesting is even within the family unit, that programming still exists. So I was really the outlier in the family in terms of supporting him and saying, hey, you don't have to go to school. There's lots of ways to do it. You don't have to go to school. And it was a contrarian attitude. And thank goodness it's paid off. He's doing really, really well. Most importantly, outside of the finances, is he's happy. He's happy with his journey. That's what the goal is.
Very cool. I think from a empathetic standpoint, that conversation you had with your son where you're like, you're doing okay, you don't need to go to school. I had a very similar conversation with my dad. we were sitting down one night. I'm like, all right, Dad, I'm ready for the talk of when you're going to tell me to go back to school. Because I had dropped out of school in order to pursue this dream of mine of content creation and trying to get to where I'm at today. And he's like, don't stop, like, keep going. And like, you can always go back to school, but you can't go back to what you're on, the
Oh,
path you're on. And
um,
so like as a son, I bet your son really appreciated that conversation. It's just that boost of confidence because I went back to work harder than I've ever worked because I'm like, somebody believes in me. Like this isn't just a pipe dream of mine. And so that I'm sure was a conversation your son will never forget. So I just think that that's a interesting perspective. So
that's really cool about your dad, by the way. I'm so
yeah,
glad to hear that. That's just amazing. That's really,
yeah,
really cool.
something I won't
Congratulations.
ever forget. Thank you.
Yeah.
When when you were working at AT&T, you said your manager really beat into you and honed a lot of skills that were very
Yeah.
important to you. What do you think were some of the most important skills that she taught you?
Attention to detail.
Okay. Do you have an instance when it really paid off?
Oh yeah. I mean, it pays off every day. I'll tell you a little bit more about her. When she graduated from that super crazy business school, she got picked up by Procter and Gamble. Procter and
Gotcha.
Gamble is an amazing, amazing company. They only hire new recruits. They put you through these rigorous management programs, and they really hire from within. They're just an amazing, successful company. Um, and part of that process is this like beat down and recreation process, which is very similar to what a lot of organizations do, whether it's a fraternity or a sports team or whatever. You got to be recreated in that mold. So one of the ways that they did it, which is still gives me PTSD to this day, is edits. So I'm starting out working for her, and she's 50 million levels above me, as is most of the teams that I worked on. And so I would be taking minutes and doing organizational work on these teams. And part of that is, we sit in a meeting and we would, there'd be a structure to create the minutes because the minutes would really be assigning tasks. And the nuances that she taught me to use in language helped create power for me in terms of, persuasiveness, bringing a team together and all these different things. So I learned a lot. Like I said, I credit her with so much, but the process of doing that is this editing and this re-editing process. Like, I'm not joking here. There would be minutes that she would mark up 9 or 10 times before she would allow me to edit. And it
Wow.
was very frustrating, because I'm 20 nothing and I'm, anxious to get moving, blah, 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 blah. I got a little bit of ego at the time and I'm better and I'm blah, blah, blah. I want to go, I want to do, I got to get past this. I got to get on some other tasks. She just hit the brakes, go 9, 10 times. And, I remember like third or fourth set of minutes, that we've been doing this. I went back to her and I was like, listen, like, does this ever end? And she's like, I just want you to know you got it easy. When I was at P&G, it would sometimes come back 20 times. She said,
Wow.
you have to learn how to properly do these things. So that was a combination of attention to detail, using language for power, and pushing the ball forward. A big set of
Very
my,
cool.
yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. So take me from AT&T. Where did you go? How long were you at AT&T? And then what was your journey like from there?
Here you'll laugh, or other people will laugh, but it became about a girl, right?
Always
So
is.
always is, right? So I had met this girl in college, and she lived in a different city than I did in Canada, and her dad owned a company that had offices in Canada and the United States, and I said to her, I said, listen, I can't move to your city. I won't have a job, and there are no jobs in your city. And she's like, well, I'm not moving to your city because, you're a workaholic and I'll see you a week, an hour a week, and that's not going to work for me. And so her dad came in and said, listen, what if I give you an equivalent job in California and you guys move down? We'll all move down together as a family and it'll all work out. And I said, okay, fine, whatever, right? Because hey, for the girl.
Hmm.
And I moved down to California and I was like, okay, whatever. I mean, I made a deal, but the job equivalent didn't exist. And instead, the job was really son-in-law, wait around, follow him around for 20 years, and then maybe run the company after that. And I said, I'm not built like this. I said, like, this is a bit of bait and switch on me. This is not what I signed up for. And my wife at the time, since now ex-wife, was really supportive. And she's like, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm going to, talk to people. And one of my buddies who retired at 30, he said, Steve, you should get into the security business. So I'm like, okay. So 23 years old, opened up my first security company, which I ended up running for 8 years. And that was it. That was more or less, how I got to the States. And that was my first big entrepreneurial venture, a company that lasted for a number of years.
So what was the security company? Because I feel like that's a pretty big jump from what you were doing, and then it sounds like you ran it for 8 successful years. What was that?
It was a security contractor. So, like ADT and those other security companies, right? They do alarms and some of them do cameras and stuff like that. We did large camera access control type security jobs. So I had a bit of a specialty in prisons, correctional institutions. So I did a lot of jails throughout California, a lot of commercial properties and so forth. So that was my specialty. And it was a huge leap. And I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I was a suburban kid from Toronto, like I'd barely turned a screwdriver in my entire life. I had no idea what I was doing. Like I can't begin to tell you how under-equipped I was for that role. But my mother had told me something that has stuck with me to this day. She said, necessity is the mother of invention. And I didn't have a choice. I had to make it work. So I had to teach myself in a hurry everything about this. And I paid for all of my mistakes. I had no mentors. I had no help. The family that I was part of at the time actually wanted me to fail because they wanted me to be part of the family business. So I'm battling on all fronts at that point. And it was intense and it was awesome. And it was a great training for where I'm at today.
I just want to quickly wrap up on this and then we'll keep going. What do you think your greatest success was, the greatest learning point from that company? And what was probably the most difficult part of that company for you?
Yeah, being a contractor, any type of contractor, I think is like one of the toughest businesses in America today. I think that it's just so difficult. I'm not going to run into it, but I think it's very, very difficult. I have tremendous respect for contractors, whether he's your landscaper, your pool guy, your a residential landscaper, whether he's building a building. It's an incredibly difficult business to be successful at. So I was able to push myself because I was at such a disadvantage. So I was able to kind of really try to exercise some of my potential. I think that was an achievement. I think making the company last for 8 years was an achievement. The biggest thing that I learned from it was, again, the journey to self-discovery. What is really going to make me happy? There was a point when I was 28, 29, running the company 5 years, had figured it out, had figured out the business, figured out how to make money. And, I had luxury cars and was building a custom house in Laguna Beach. You know what I mean? Like I was doing well financially.
Yeah.
And I was bitterly unhappy. Relationship with that wife had just fallen to pieces fairly rapidly. And, the realization of having the strength to leave was very, very difficult. And just understanding throughout that process to listen to myself, listen to my intuition more than following some program or some policy or some societal plan for you is much more important if you're going to find happiness. That was what I learned.
Got it. Thanks for sharing. So how and why did you wind that business down, and then what was next?
Well, I'd taken a large contract through a general contractor, and the end user was California Youth Authority. So California Youth Authority, there's a lot of prisons in California, a lot of prisons in America, but the prison structure in the United States on the state level, you've got juvenile detention facilities, which are run by the counties. And then if you have like juvenile offenders that have been really, really bad guys, the state has another prison system, which is an intermediate prison system between juvie and adult prison that they call California Youth Authority. And
Okay.
I think it's 10, 11 prisons throughout California, usually old U.S. Army barracks and from World War I. And this is where folks between 15 and 25 years old will be housed before they transition to adult. And I've been in a lot of prisons, and these were by far the worst prisons in terms of having the worst offenders, just folks that are just broken. A really, really, really difficult situation. Anyway, so I took on a job. It was $14 million, big job. And we ran into a technicality. We ran into asbestos. And there's a lot of rules around asbestos. I'm not going to get into it, but long story short is I didn't get paid what I was due for the asbestos work. And I was strung along. The payment was coming, but it never did come. And as a result, from, being on top of the world at 28, 29, 30, 31 years old, bankrupt.
Wow.
Yep.
So looking back, obviously hindsight's 2020, what do you think you could have done to prevent that?
It goes to experience. I didn't have the experience or knowledge to properly handle that process. There were rights that I had that I didn't know about. And had I properly known about them and exercised them, I wouldn't have had that problem.
Got it. Okay. So I can see where your deep-rooted respect for contractors comes from now.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances to it. But I will share with you that I'm 31 years old. I've just, given all my team members their final checks and said, hey, the party's over. We're done. I'm sitting there. I'm crushed because so much of my personal identity is wrapped up in that business, which I loved. And I don't know my worth. I don't know how much I'm worth in the market because I never worked in the market before. So I'm like, man, now what do I do? Right? I got bills to pay. So I was pleasantly surprised that I had actually a very high worth in the market, and I got some great offers from it. And then became a bit of a series of saying no to different offers, things that matured into big money things. But hey, you live in.
So what was your path from like the 30,000 foot view from your path from bankrupt at 31 to where you are now?
50 years old now. Those years from about 31 to say 43, 44 were kind of fun. Okay. In that time period, I divorced my first wife, met my second wife, married, had a few different jobs in the industry, sold one company to a big security company, and everybody made tons of cash. Walked away from a couple other opportunities that sold out and made tons of cash, which is why I kind of kicked myself a little bit about it. But hey, at least I had the one. Really strengthened relationships. After going BK, there's kind of like a 10-year penalty that you have to pay personally. And so, in terms of bank applications, credit cards, just credit, all that stuff, it's fairly devastating for 10 years. So I couldn't really do much. So I did a couple contracting side companies here and there, taking jobs from friends, on the side, and did some double dipping for, here and there. And, just kind of, I was waiting. I wasn't taking anything overly seriously from a job perspective. I was waiting for when I could re-express myself and, do what I felt I was built to do and what makes me happiest, which is, be a founder and a leading manager. So that's what I kind of did. So I bounced around a little bit, made some money, had some fun.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could spend like a whole hour just diving into like how you exited the company successfully and just things like that. But congratulations, that's super cool. Not many people can say that they've exited companies, and I think it honestly, that's one of the reasons why I love America so much, is because you can go bankrupt and then in a few short years be sitting on loads of cash again. Like and I think it's so understated in America. People don't take risks because they're afraid of failure. They're afraid of this big word, bankruptcy. But in reality, it's just a huge net of saving that we have. So I think it's a cool testament to that. So thanks for sharing. So,
and by the way, let me just iterate on that. You're exactly right. We've had 2 U.S. presidents that have gone bankrupt at least once before they became presidents. It's just a part of the system. And this goes back to finding yourself, right? There's no shame in it. I mean, I'm here talking to however many people are going to watch this thing and sharing how I went bankrupt. Not the end of the world. One of the beautiful things about OTC in general, we could talk about the stock a little bit, is this risk reward calculation that OTC happens. So I'll share with you a quick anecdote. I was in some, leadership conference thing, whatever, and the guy sitting beside me was previously assistant chairman or assistant president, whatever, of NASDAQ. Okay. Super high level guy. And I'm the OTC CEO, right? So I'm what's considered an issuer in technical language. So I say, hey man, I'm an issuer. It's my ticker. I'm on the pinks. He's like, oh yeah. And I'm such a retail investor forward kind of guy, like I know that there's lives on the other end of the keyboard strokes when they buy AITX. I know that, I feel it, I connect with it, I care about it. And I know that on the OTC pinks, there are a zillion scam companies, and I see them in front of me and I see the hype and it drives me crazy and I can't say anything. But anyway, I'm sitting beside this guy, this is maybe 3 years ago, and our stock was taking a beating at the time because my previous CEO had entered into some toxic lending agreements, and my retail investors were getting shattered, and it was really a bad scene and not how I operate. I took over shortly after that, make sure we didn't do those deals anymore. Anyways, I'm talking to him. I was like, listen, what's happening on the exchanges to add protections for retail investors, right? So this is an issuer talking to a senior exchange guy about protecting retail. And it was an astounding moment for me. I thoroughly expected, I was certain that he would ramble off 5 or 10 initiatives that they've got ongoing right now and that are going to help protect retail and clean things up, not just on OTC, but on NASDAQ as well. And that's what I was certain he would say. And his response couldn't have been more different. Instead, I'm going to summarize his response. He put it much more poetically than I'm sharing it with you here. But he said, listen, he says, this is America. This is risk reward. It's buyer beware. You got to figure it out, And I was like astounded. And I thought to myself, and he said, listen, he said, we can't do too much control because it would reduce liquidity. And reducing liquidity will reduce funding, example, for companies like AITX. So you have good companies like AITX, but in that system, you have bad actors work their way into that system. So what do? Do you shut down the system and shut down companies like AITX? Then you're reducing America's power of commerce and economy. And I was like, wow. It's like, okay. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting. I still think that's an interesting story. I don't know what you think about it.
No, I really like that. I think I've heard you speak on it multiple times that there are bad apples, and kind of do your due diligence, like figure it out, like read the statements yourself. Don't. So I think that is actually quite profound, because why end the game and take your ball and go home when it's just like, don't play the game if you're afraid,
Don't play the game if you're afraid. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you end up as CEO of AITX?
I was working with NVIDIA in the Bay Area, and had built some relationships there, which are still strong to this day. And they had shown me an early, a pre-release version of the Jetson platform, of the first Jetson platform. Jetson is really well known because they managed to miniaturize tremendous GPU into a portable low power board. And so we're walking around their office one day, and they were really instrumental in my development as well. And we have a battery, a small little monitor, and a Jetson. Oh, and a camera. There's a camera pinned on top of the back of the Jetson. So we're carrying around this little thing. We're walking around the office, and we're doing human detection in real time. So just to put this in perspective, this would have been 8-9 years ago. And this stuff didn't exist. Like, it didn't exist. Now today, folks like yourself, you're like, well, why doesn't it do that? Like, this is like 19, this is 2023. This is ridiculous. But 8-9 years ago, it was like, what? You're walking through strange environments, i.e. environments new to the system, and you're doing accurate human detection in real time, which is revolutionary. I'm seeing this thing walk around, and I have obviously security guy and an AI background and all this. And I'm like, I'm going to make a security robot. And I was just with these guys a few weeks ago in Vegas, and they retold the story to me of that moment in the conference room when I stood up, I banged the desk, and I said, I'm making a security robot company. It was funny to hear it from their perspective. But that was it. And then I spent about a year doing different research and stuff, preparing for it. And then opened up the company in July of 2016. Bootstrap, friends and family, and then managed to figure out how to do a reverse takeover of an OTC company, which had that existing CEO. And then, there's a whole new area to learn.
Yeah.
Was becoming an OTC CEO. Yeah, that was kind of a synopsis of how I did it.
Was the company that you so it was a reverse takeover, you said, right?
Yeah.
Was that company in the security field, or did you kind of just do the reverse takeover of the ticker pretty much?
Yeah, reverse takeover, takeover. So there's like statuses of companies, like you might see shell companies on the OTC pinks. I'll advise and I'll say shell companies are I would really question validity of investment potential with shell companies. So there's a class of company that have a exchange status as an operating company versus a shell. The reason is that shells can't raise money the same way operating companies can. So it's a huge distinction. So there's operating companies that have had businesses in them, and either the businesses are winding down or there's some problem or something like that, but they're still an operating company. So those are the ones that you want to find and reverse into, and then you crush or kill the existing business and you reinvent the company, which I did, into AITX.
Okay. So did you have to, I'm very curious about the tactical side of things on that. Did you have to buy out the ticker? How did you do the reverse takeover exactly?
Yeah. Okay. So bear with me on this one, because this is
Got it.
this is a spider web. Okay?
I love this stuff. Let's see it.
All right. All right. So what you have is you have a company. You have the ticker,
Okay.
and the ticker has a value, and then you have your company, which also has a value. And what you want to do is you want to be the guy who owns the ticker. That's why it's called reverse takeover. So here's the rub. The ticker is going to buy you, and they're going to pay for you by giving them to you. Yeah, you see what I mean? That's how it is.
Yeah.
So for example, the ticker had, let's just say 5,000, I'll call them super equity shares. Okay, that control the company. And in our company, we've got a super voting class of shares, which I own, 75% of, or plus or minus. Super equity shares, which I own, 50% of, whatever. So when I did the reverse takeover, the ticker gave me all those shares and therefore control and equity majority in exchange for the company having another set of legs, another life. Okay. So that's the exchange. So the shareholders, hey, they're not dead yet. They get to grow with another company. We get to attract new company. We get to build and grow. That's how it's done.
Very cool. Awesome. So I love there's this whole world I was able to go onto the New York Stock Exchange and learn a lot of how that works, and I've also been able to learn how to start a company in a way of goal of IPO. So I love learning these kind of things. What was your, because I hear you referred to as obviously CEO, but do you have the tag, do you wear the tag of founder very often? Do you call yourself founder of AITX, or how does that work?
I do. Okay. I try to use the tag of founder more than CEO.
Got it.
And I do that deliberately, not for any credit or ego, because if you haven't tell, I don't care about that, but just because there's a distinction between a founder and a CEO, a huge distinction. The CEO is someone who is hired or found or grows up in the business, whatever it is, but they're not the founder. Being a founder is a particular responsibility and vision. You're the person with the vision. You're the person with the drive. You're the person that's made so many different sacrifices along the way that ties you to your company in a way that no CEO ever could be tied to it. So I try to use that distinction for those reasons.
Very cool. I like that a lot. So take me, you have the ticker, you get everything accounting wise on the up and up. What's the first order of operations? How do you start getting your first products out? What are your first products, and what was that like?
So we were an operating company. So we were, we had a sales funnel, we had a product, we needed a lot of money for development, which is pretty much every tech company ever. So I needed to do the reverse because I needed more money. I needed millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars to develop what it is. And as well, we started with a particular vision and a concept. And what you can do as founder all the time, and what you can do as CEO some of the time, is change course and adapt. And that's what we had to do when our first product failed and the company almost failed along with it. We had to do a reinvention of ourselves. We had such a strong team, such a strong vision for how we wanted the security industry to change, that we adapted along with it. My team, I brought the team down, I think, to 13 or 17 team members. Everybody went on deferred salary. We got through that period, but it was crushing. But those are the stories that you need to be a resilient business. I think resiliency is what you could do as a founder. The reason I say that is because a CEO is generally bound by whatever the board of directors has told them to do. And this limits them. So now all of a sudden you have a situation where you have a committee sitting on top of you, telling you what to do, or agreeing or disagreeing. And that creates conflict and slows the process down. As a founder with majority control, hey, you have an executive team, or we have an executive team that is involved in everything that we do. But at the end of the day, I can make a decision and have it executed, versus if I was a CEO and I wanted to change course, I got to go get board of directors approval and da, 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 da. So it allows you to be much more nimble.
Cool. You can see that a lot in today's marketplace. For example, Mark Zuckerberg still has his thumb pretty heavily on Meta, I guess you can call it now. He's one of the few founder CEOs. Obviously, Elon is a huge one. But the CEOs, watching all the Twitter drama that went on, because Elon wasn't a founder of Twitter, he had to go through the board of directors. You heard that phrase go on millions of times because it wasn't his decision. So I think that the more I'm in this world of executives, founders, trading companies, is being a founder is actually it's like a superpower. Like it's a phrase that nobody can take from you, and you earned. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well,
yeah, what is would you mind just giving me a summary of what AITX is? I know you guys have 3 subsidiaries. What do the different products do? What's the overall mission of AITX?
The overall mission is that we have a vision that security is going to change. And just kind of putting it in more entertaining terms, we have a vision where robots of all different types are performing all different types of tasks in our daily life and all around us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that this vision is particularly unique. I don't think that anything that anybody does in their life is unique. But we're kind of at the forefront to execute it. And that's the difference. So we've created a suite of hardware, software from the ground up to help execute and put us on this path to continue to create multitude of devices that can perform security and facilities management work. The output of this is better security, lower cost for the enterprises, and just kind of tightening society. Now, does this move us into some kind of future, with machines and AI running things? It does, and that's inevitable. And so, we made the decision years ago, hey, if we really believe it's inevitable, might as well join them because it's coming. So that's really powers us and fuels us during the dark days that we have. Like, someone's going to do this. Let it be us.
Got it. I like that a lot. What are the different products you guys have? I'll probably put them up here on screen, but walk me through the different suite of hardware, or just the combined products that you sell to enterprises.
Sure. What we're looking to do is we're looking to create an interactivity between a machine, our machines, and people. So in many cases, in most cases, not all, in many cases, those people that we're looking for either are doing bad things or have intent to do bad things to some extent. So, for example, trespassing, loitering, vandalism, solicitation, narcotics trafficking, all these different things that are difficult from a security perspective to handle. Do you want to send a low-paid security guard, into a narcotic situation? Are the cops going to respond to 100 calls, a year from a particular business threatening the existence of that business, right? So there's a lot of factors at play here. What we have proven is that intelligent interaction with potential perpetrators removes the problem. The problem just doesn't happen. And we've got hundreds of cases where we have stopped a problem from happening. So we do it through a product called Rosa. And Rosa is, it's got a couple cameras in it, it's got a light board, it's got audio, and we use visual analytics, i.e. human detection, running back, 8 years ago to the NVIDIA days. And then we've amped up the detection analytics. So now, we'll do loitering, we'll do anti-loitering, we'll do all different types of human behaviors. So the clients can say, hey, I have a problem with tagging. I have a problem with break and entry. I have a problem walking to my parking lot at night because we're getting accosted or there was a sexual assault in the parking lot a while ago, blah, 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 blah. We're like, okay. So we said, okay, we take that, we translate it into, okay, how's the machine going to see what it needs to see in order to interact? And I say it so simply because that's what it is. And I think that the great ideas are the ones that you can succinctly put, and where the people on the other end of the call are saying, well, that's freaking obvious. Why hasn't anyone done that before? Those are the ideas that I'm investing my life in. Why haven't
Love it.
anyone done it before? We're doing it now.
Obviously, you have been around AI for a long time now. You've written books. You're working in a company that's heavily involved into AI. And before, like I've been following AITX. I just think you're a fascinating entrepreneur, and the company is very interesting as well. What is your take on the current status of AI and all the hype around it? And have you seen any shift in momentum with that hype?
Oh, I think it's amazing. I'm so glad it's starting to finally happen. Um, you're in a great position, by the way. Like, I just want to say, you and so many of your peers are in a great position to really harness this um, and figure out how to make enterprise businesses better, right? The money is so much money on the enterprise side on streamlining their operations and helping them grow their profits. There's so much money. They're so willing to invest in that kind of thing. So I think that it's happening, back in the old days, last year, if I wanted to know something, I'd Google it. Now, of course, I go into ChatGPT and, I get like the Matrix, back in my head. Okay,
Yeah.
I do karate now, right? So this is amazing. This goes back towards that era of when, AI machines are going to be a huge part of our life. And it's best illustrated, as you said, by following Twitter, where, there's controversies on, oh, I'm being shadow banned, or, oh, why are Elon Musk's always at the top of my feed, right? All of this stuff influences us. One of the things that was proven, I mean, many of us knew it along the way, but it was proven beyond a doubt, was the Cambridge Analytic scandal with Facebook. Do you remember that? Might have been a little before.
I've vaguely heard about it. Like I know there's a story there.
Okay, so what happened was Facebook kind of illegally let a lot of personal information out to Cambridge Analytica, and those guys figured out how they could feed information via ads and organic posts to different members of the population in order for them to think certain ways and, most importantly, vote certain ways. So what was proven through that thing is that by controlling the information without question, you could control different types of outcomes. And this is where, the dangers of AI and information management become so apparent, because, it had a very deliberate effect on the 2016 election.
What are some of the dangers you see? You're in the security industry. You obviously are doing a lot of good for the community and humanity. What are some of the dangers you see with AI and how that could impact normal everyday life?
Politics as it is again, it's an ancient, at least Americans, we have a very old political system. The polarity between the two sides is extreme and stagnates our ability to develop and grow and be aggressive and take chances. And that's what the problem is going to be. Or sorry, that's what the problem is today. I don't really see an end to it, but I'll ask you a couple of simple questions. If I can bank through my computer, why can't I vote through my phone? Just basic questions like that, right? I can pay my taxes online, but I can't vote. So, we have some systems in place that, anyway, so politics are definitely the risk.
Got it. Cool. So a couple of questions for your CEO hat now. I feel like I got to know the founder hat pretty well, the CEO hat. How do you deal with the loudness that comes from investors complaining or not satisfied? How do you deal with that?
So it's been a journey. Certainly in the early days, I was so affected. I was so connected. I was so, engaged from the standpoint of, oh my God, what's happening? Why isn't the stock going up? We're a great company, or I think we are. And that has changed to saying, hey, I am going to over disclose, I'm going to overshare, I am going to make sure that anybody interested in this company has the opportunity to really learn what's happening so that they're informed. From that point on, there's nothing that I can do. So that's kind of how I handle it.
Got
I
it.
just commit to engaging and sharing.
Got
Yep.
it.
And the rest of it just kind of rolls off me. Like, for instance, I'll give you my favorite one.
Yeah.
I get this probably once a day, literally once a day. It's probably the most frequent. There's two things that are most frequent outreach I get. One is, why don't you do a buyback? Why don't you do a buyback? And as soon as I get that question, I think to myself, okay, whoever's asking the question has no idea what the heck they're talking about. Buybacks are for large mega caps that have a tremendous amount of offshore cash and they want to repatriate it to their US investors, but they don't want to pay taxes. So you do a buyback. That's what a buyback is for. It's not for an OTC company that's in the process of raising money on its way to profitability. So I'm like, okay, I'm dealing with someone who doesn't know what they're doing. The next thing that I get is the reverse split. And I'm like, oh my God, like I filed corporate paperwork restricting my process to do a reverse split, at least for a period of time. So I just continue engagement. I dig deep to find the time to engage and train and educate and make sure people are informed.
Got it. How do you, because this is something that I mean, it's obviously our goal to become a public company. And how do you not let the day-to-day stock fluctuations affect morale of the company or you personally or those close to you?
Well, I tell everybody in the company, don't look at the stock. And I actually try not to look at the stock as well. So oftentimes I can go 2 or 3 days without looking at the stock. Usually it's shareholders or it's social chatter or it's that kind of thing that then kind of makes me go take a look. And the reason is that I can't affect the day to day. You know, I can only do what I can do. So I want the stock to go up every day. I want to be green every day. I want to have massive volume every day. Sometimes I go on and I'll look at other tickers that I think are total scams. And I'll just sit there, shake my head. I might make a call to someone else in the business with me, and I'll be like, "What the fuck is happening with that? How
Yeah.
come these guys are getting volume? This job is a joke. This guy's a joke."
Yeah.
So I'll do that. But I know that my plan and my path is the right one, and that is full disclosure, do everything right. You know, I've got attorneys who look at everything that I do all the time. My securities attorney is my most frequent phone call every day, you know, anywhere up to 5 times a day. I'm on the phone with them. Hey, what about this? What about this? Making sure that we're playing within the lines. And my fear that I do that for is because when hopefully we get to do the NASDAQ uplisting, an army of attorneys that don't have our interests at heart are going to go through every single filing, every single tweet, every single video, and look for areas where they can claim that we screwed up. And there'll be shareholder lawsuits or stuff like that. So my goal is to make sure that we are as absolutely clean as possible. And it's a task.
Very cool. I think that's you can't argue transparency, right? And I think that's super valuable, especially to investors. What is your path to profitability? Because obviously lots of expenses, lots of OpEx. What's your path to get back in the black?
Because tremendous amount of liquidity has dropped out of the OTC over the last couple of months. You know, we used to on the OTC trade about $2 billion a day. Now it's 1.2, 1.3. It's a tremendous loss in liquidity. We're going to see companies go bankrupt. We're already seeing double-digit increases in bankruptcies across the United States right now. I read an article, National Observer, last week that laid out the stats. So we've got to be very aware of that. And because of that, the last couple of months, I've had a very strong focus on cost reduction and expense control.
I saw that.
Yeah. So that's continuing. That hasn't stopped. That will continue. And we're going to continue to watch every penny, every investment, every single thing we do in order to narrow that gap, right? We're going to grow revenues. We're going to reduce expenses. We're going to hit that point where, hey, I don't have to raise money anymore in order to keep the company going. And that's a point in time that I really look forward to, because just to share a little bit of the CEO founder's life, you have to be in, 5 different departments at once and raise money and do legal and do this and that. And, not having to raise money would be a tremendous relief for me and a boon to the company because I'd be able to focus more on other areas.
Got it. What do you manage your own schedule? Do you have an assistant that does it? Because I can imagine, like you said, 5 departments, it can be quite hectic at times.
No assistant. I've had assistants in the past. I don't like that process at all. Instead, the way that I do it is my executive team. We have 8 people on the executive team. I count on them to prioritize what I should be attending to and what I shouldn't be.
Okay.
So they're really the gatekeepers to my schedule as opposed to an assistant. Yeah. And I know that
Got
you
it.
do a lot of that coordination work. You're in a different field. But for me, no, I run solo, just like Elon. We run solo.
Got it. Love it. What is talking about Elon? He's kind of over the last, I think yesterday, the day before was the 6-month mark taking over Twitter. He's, in my opinion, kind of put a master class on of how to run a company, how to take a struggling company and turn it into he publicly said they're about to break even. Share with me what kind of things you've learned watching that. If you've watched it, maybe you haven't. What have you learned from that takeover, if you have?
Well, I wouldn't say that I learned anything new. I would say that different lessons that I've learned previously were reinforced.
Okay.
And the biggest lesson that I'll share that was reinforced, not learned, but reinforced, is that humans in management positions have a natural instinct to grow their departments, whether they need to or they don't. It's just, I can do better. I need more people. I need more people. I need more people. I need more people. Generally, you don't. You need to be more efficient and better at what you do. The problem isn't always adding bodies at it. And Elon with his, massive layoffs proved that. But, again, it was just reinforcement versus versus a new lesson.
Got it. Who's an entrepreneur that you look up to, or a CEO that you look up to?
There's no, there's no one really that I really look at like, oh my God, like this is from the book of the guy who founded Nike, or this is from Musk, or this is from Cuban, or anything like that. Like, I'm not on social that much. There's one guy who has had influence on me, and that would be Bill Gates. So if there's any one guy that I kind of looked at or studied the most, it would be him. But I haven't really done any of that in 10, 15 years. And when I'm on Instagram and so forth, and I say, oh, you should do this and that, I immediately, avoid those types of, I think those are entertainment posts. Those aren't real posts. This is a real conversation, giving real value, not giving a little dopamine release by seeing something friendly and fun.
Gotcha. And then just to wrap up here, I really appreciate your time. You've been absolutely phenomenal. I personally have gained a lot of value learning from you. What do you think is, obviously we're in what you can call recessionary times. We came out of 2020, 2021 with the age of stimulus and a booming economy where GDP was growing. And as an economy, we're kind of paying for that time right now. How have you positioned your company? Obviously, you said you've been cutting revenue, but what are some other pieces of advice or things that you've done to position your company in this recessionary time, if you will?
So funny. Like literally the project that I was working on before we opened up our call this morning was marketing repositioning.
Got
So
it.
our marketing repositioning is going to be something that we really started on, which was cost savings and efficiency and labor savings with performance increases. So, I feel that the last couple of years, we've really kind of deviated our messaging to be more of a tech message. And I think that needs to be recalled, and we need to go full on, hey, we're saving you money and improving your performance, which was our original message we started the company on. So I want to bring it back to that. I also want to mention that the recession is going to be, it's already happening, by sector. So some sectors will continue to do well and some sectors will do badly. I would say that tech outside of profits, because for the first time, I think we're seeing tech companies lead the way in saying, hey, I might still make a ton of money, but I'm going to make more. And so we're going to reduce Meta by 13%, and then we're going to do another one by 11%, and so forth, right? So that changes the calculus for tech workers. I think the trades, the physical trades, where I, obviously as a contractor, where I learned for many years, is going to have a resurgence. There's going to be lots of opportunity doing physical work again. And it's just exciting. It's exciting if you have the right attitude in the economy to seize the opportunities and really to shed legacy and traditional ideas so that you can, forge your own path.
Got it. Thank you. And then just to wrap up here, obviously you're a seasoned serial entrepreneur. You're a veteran executive. What advice do you have to somebody like me that may be on the younger side of an executive team? What advice do you have for me as I go through my career in an executive role throughout multiple different companies?
Same advice that I've given to my kids and about a dozen other young folks that I have the pleasure of doing, informal coaching for, which is look within, start within. Are you really working towards a financial success future because that's what you want, or has that been inputted into you? What is your real path to happiness? Start there, because what I learned is that so much of this was put upon me as a kid. And then as you reach adulthood, particularly your early 20s, you're like, holy crap, I'm not rich yet. And there's always one or two examples in your life of some guy who did make it at a young age and it makes you feel bad and stuff. And so I'm saying shed all that, understand who you are, really practice self-love and adopt it, and let that be your guide.
Cool. I appreciate it. And I just have one more question that's kind of been rattling around in my brain. When you were, I think it was 31, bankrupt, bankrupt, and so when you were doing that security company for 8 years, you said you were making a lot of money but weren't happy. But then in a couple of years later, you had a lot of money and were happy. The variable of money
I wasn't happy. Wasn't happy. I had a lot of money, but wasn't happy. Yeah.
So what changed your what was the defining the core of the question is what changed in your scale of happiness? What was the variable that changed?
When I started behaving the way that I wanted to behave, instead of the way that I felt I needed to behave, the way that I was told to behave or trained to behave, that's what changed for me. Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
that goes back to that piece of advice that I gave you, which is start with yourself.
Okay. I love that. Thank you. And Steve, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an honor. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. Where can people follow you? Where can people learn more about your company?
Twitter's a great point, right? Steve Reinharz at Steve Reinharz is just a great point to see what's going on with AITX. I have a website, www.stevereinharz.com, which I'm going to post this video with your permission, because I think this is a great video, and there's a little bit more information there. But the other thing is I work really hard to be accessible, and folks can, reach out via Twitter or email or whatever, and I'm happy to engage.
Awesome. Steve, I thank you so much for coming on. It's been a ton of fun. Guys, if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. We love having guests on the podcast just like Steve, where he brings value and teaches young entrepreneurs how to grow and executives how to run businesses better. And I look forward to seeing what AITX does in the future. And Steve, thank you so much for coming on.
One of the best interviews. Great questions. Really enjoyed interacting with you. Look forward to the next time.
Well, guys, I had a ton of fun learning about who Steve Reinharz is as an entrepreneur, CEO, and founder, and all the lessons that he's learned along the way. I gained a lot of valuable insights, and I'm super grateful that he was able to come onto the podcast.